2, 1. Welcome and good afternoon to the Snooker Gym Live, the very first YouTube live streaming show, an event for coaching. As I said to you yesterday, I'm going to start with your top three mistakes. And we're going to split that into the 3 different levels of player. If we can get a blank page. And once we've gone through that, that'll be 5 or 10 minutes. We may respond to questions after I've gone through this. So make sure you are logged in to your YouTube account to be able to make comments and send your own questions. And I'll be going to one of the computers we've got set up here to check the questions and answer some good ones. We've already got some good ones lined up. If I can get time to address some other ones, we will also do that, pick some of the best ones. And make sure you subscribe to the channel as well for future updates and live streams such as this one. So to start with your top 3 mistakes, up to 40 break players we've got pre-shot, post-shot, and actually we should probably put that down there, post-shot, on-shot. So I don't know if the camera can move a little bit closer here to see more clearly what we're doing. The biggest mistake up to 40 break players make on the pre-shot routine is they don't have one. So they have no plan for the shot. They don't even see the line of aim. In fact, they'll start their shot here, chalk their cue and just move sideways into the shot with no confirmation of the line of aim, no thought of where they're going to put the cue ball or the next shot, and no thought therefore of what height and speed they need to play the cue ball. Unless the line of aim and the height and speed are all resolved in your own mind before you play the shot, it's just not going to happen. It's guesswork, random, pot luck. If we can just pan the camera over here to this disc here, what we want to do is decide exactly what height and what speed to play the shot before you even begin approaching. Without that, no chance. Okay, so they don't have one. On the shot, their biggest mistake is they're rushing. They have no cue action, there's no routine, no rhythm. So even the guy on the wall behind me here, a few of us know who he is, he's not too bad. Even he cues 2 or 3 times most of the time. Most club players cue only once. They'll get down and nervously line up and quick as they can get rid of the shot because they're intimidated by it. So I playfully say to them, are you better than Ronnie O'Sullivan? And they'll say, not yet. And I'll say, well, why are you queuing up less than he is then? So that gets the cogs ticking, and they'll usually start queuing up a bit more often then. So, no queuing. Thirdly is the post-shot routine. So, again, there isn't one. But what players desperately need at this level of the game, what they desperately need is learning and improvement. And this is why most players never improve and get 40 breaks. I don't know what the percentage is, 99% of players probably have never had a 40 rate, 999 out of 1,000 maybe, who knows. So, really important after the shot to stay down . What we want to do is stay down on the shot . For plenty of time, count 1, 2, or even have the mantra like Shaun Murphy and Steve Davis did in the 80s, when you miss, stay down longer. The most common habit for players at this level is they'll not want to stay down on the shot when they've played a good shot or a bad shot. Judgment becomes more important. Yes, I played a great shot. Ah, what a dummy, I missed an easy one again. So their judgment stops them observing and watching the shot. And so you need your 1-2 to stay down. Then that allows you to watch the result, both the balls, and feel what the cue's done. That allows you to diagnose any issues, which allows you to prescribe any solution for the next time you're faced with such a shot or similar. So this feedback loop, this learning loop here, is everything for players at this standard, and no one at this standard does this properly unless they've had proper instruction, which is why most players don't lift themselves above this level. Alright, now let's go to 40 to 100 break players. Big mistake here is we've all heard that, making an ass out of you and me, assume. They assume that they're cueing straight. How difficult can it be to deliver the cue in a straight line? They assume they're delivering the cue straight. What that then leads to on the diagnosis, on the self-diagnosis is, these players, they're able to self-diagnose to a degree, but their diagnosis is then all wrong. Because they have the assumption, how difficult can it be to deliver the cue straight? Even top players in the game will admit to you they're not delivering the cue straight all the time. They strive to do that, but they're not, by any stretch of the imagination. So the player who assumes mistakenly that they're cueing straight will naturally conclude, I'm missing because my aiming is wrong. 90% of players who walk in this room and say they've got an aiming problem, who are at this standard, have a cueing problem. Aiming is not an issue. Once you can get to this level, 90% of players are aiming perfectly well. It's all to do with cueing and pulling the cue offline, and we'll come on to why in step 2, which is holding the cue too tight. That leads to wooden, choppy action with no freedom, no fluidity. And also you tend to start gripping too tight during the delivery or the backswing, and if you just watch the tip of the cue, when I tighten my hand, look what the tip of the cue's doing. There's no way you can keep the cue still. Look at my arm. Well, if you do the same thing, just tighten and relax your hand, you'll see it moving. That movement moves into the cue as well. You will pull the cue offline. If you just put your cue on the table and tap it gently, you'll see the tiny amount of effort required to move the cue off a line. So it's very easy to do when you're holding too tight. So almost all players at this level, I see them holding the cue too tight, far too tight than they need to. Number 3. What they're doing is they only have this amount of movement in the cue. What I mean by that is, if that's a full follow through and that's a full backswing, they're operating in here only. They don't have the flexibility of movement, freedom of movement of the hand, so they don't allow the back fingers to open, they don't allow the grip to open because it's too tight to a full backswing, and neither do they follow through to the chest properly. So what we're looking for is the ability to come back all the way when it's required and go through all the way to the chest on anything other than a dinky little roll-up shot. Having a restricted backswing means that you don't have the space to build up the speed to play the shot, which leads to over-acceleration or a jerk or a snatch, and over-tightening of the hand, which pulls the cue off the line. So that's one of the reasons the top players, some of the top players, are pulling the cue back a long way on even soft shots. It's impossible to snatch the ball if you do that. Test it and see. The danger of having a restricted follow-through is the hand tends to tighten as they deliver the cue, so they'll tend to slam the brakes on the hand and stop the hand before the cueing hand hits the chest. And again, that tightness pulls the cue off the line, as we discovered earlier. There are two other bonus mistakes that players at this level make, which I couldn't resist including. One is playing for the black area. If we just turn the camera around here, most players at 40 to 100 breaks, they're immediately moving the white ball down here to get into the black. But that costs so many players, so many breaks and so many frames, I can't begin to describe it. Imagine for a moment that every colour on the table was worth 7 points. Just think about that for a minute. Would your shot selection change? Most players have priority disorder. So what that means is they say, oh, I can get an extra point if I go down for the black instead of going for an easy positional shot on the blue. So it's more important to keep the break going with the correct percentage shot than being greedy. It's basically sheer greed to go down for the black all the time. Unless you're good enough to make a 147 on demand and get the highest break prize like some players. The other mistake is forumitis. So going onto a forum or Facebook or a YouTube channel and just getting confused into a downward spiral of technical changes all the time. I've even seen professionals who change their stance in response to missing one pot. So they'll have maybe 4 stances in a day. Can't afford to do that. Find your default settings, your optimum default settings, set it and forget it. So then, go to players from 100 to 147 break standard. Okay. So these guys are the opposite. These guys don't practice blacks enough. Both potting the black and positioning the black. They assume they're good enough to do that. I didn't start practicing blacks off the spot until probably properly until about a year or two after I'd had a 147. And then I realised when I started practicing blacks off the spot properly, I started realising where the gaps in my positional knowledge really were. So once you're good enough to make 100, start developing your black spot area positional awareness and potting skill as well. Also not practicing middle distance pots. Middle distance pots. I see far too many players putting the white here or even closer to the vault cushion and playing shots maybe with the reds near to the side cushion here, that they're only getting 2 or 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10. It's too difficult. Stick with middle distance stuff. Like for example, start here. Yeah, can you pot 10 out of 10 of these? Reds in here, stop shot for the pink. If you can you do 10 out of 10 of those? If you can you do 10 out of 10 of these? Just gradually increasing the distance. Your circle of competence, that's what we're trying to do, is gradually build your circle of competence step by step. And that might take months or years. So if you're getting something 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10, simplify it. It will prevent frustration as well and increase learning. Finally, not doing the basics right. So there's an assumption when I've reached 100 break standards, I'm a good player now, so I can just play the game and assume that everything's going to go right. I can assure you that even top professionals are not doing the basics correctly all of the time, otherwise they would all be playing their best snooker all of the time. There's an assumption that I don't need to pay attention to that simple stuff, I've mastered all of that. But being aware of what the basics are, staying still, watching the ball properly, staying in position after the shot, keeping the cue moving smoothly is a really important part of self-awareness and self-diagnosis. Before you can diagnose, you really want to know that you're doing all the basics properly and consistently. That reduces the number of mistakes to choose from, reduces your buffet of mistakes to choose from when you miss. So that simplifies the self-diagnosis process dramatically. So that's basically it. The errors we've mentioned here, let's just write that down, the basics. Watch the video again when it goes onto a repeat video on YouTube and see if you're making any of these mistakes, and work one by one on just improving them 5–10% at a time. Don't try and cram everything in at the same time. Do it step by step. Okay, so put your comments in under the video because we're going to get into Q&A now. We'll start with 2 questions that we had yesterday, which I thought were great questions. The first one is from Marko Boskovic in Montenegro. So my first customer in Montenegro. The question he said is, what about dropping the elbow? Should I drop my elbow? Well, this is such a bone of contention at the moment and one of my favourite subjects. So if you think in terms of the cue as the priority, Marko, pay attention to what the cue's doing, not the elbow, not the shoulder. So that'll be clear when I do this demonstration. So we'll move the grip hand along the cushion, okay, like so. My fingers are in contact with the cushion at all times, okay? Now the cue, look at the cue, forget the elbow, look at the cue, it's running flat, isn't it, parallel. It's running parallel, now look at my elbow. It has to drop like a piston. I mean, no one would have a backswing this much, you don't need it. I'm exaggerating. On the follow through also, the cue staying flat, look at the elbow, it has to do that piston action. If you fix the elbow, you'll get this. And that will lift the head on the backswing, or it will punch the chin on the follow through and you'll either restrict the follow through or lift the head. So keeping this elbow fixed is one of the biggest mistakes I find in players, because they either get tight in the hand or they'll restrict the backswing because the cue's pushing up into the chin, or they'll lift the head on the backswing. Now you can't lift the head and keep the cue straight. If you do this test, look, a bit of evidence-based coaching here. When you're at the club, you might be at the club now or at home, put the tip against the white ball and then lift your head an inch and lower it, an inch and lower it. Everyone who I do that test with will say, yes, the tips are moving up and down as I move the head up and down, so that ruins the positional play. But also they'll see the cue moving side to side as well. It's a very dangerous assumption to think head's lifting, but the cue's going to stay online. It isn't. So the focus of a lot of players is that they say, I've got to drop the elbow. They become elbow focused, not cue focused. So what happens then is they might overdrop, which might mean they're aiming at the bottom of the ball but hitting at the middle or at the top, or more often than not, especially up to 100 break standard, players who do this, that 90% of the time they're inconsistent in how they drop the elbow. So they'll end up doing this on one shot, this on another shot, this on another shot. They don't have the motor control or the cue skill to be able to deliver that consistently. So I always encourage players to think about flats first. Think of a flat cue action first, piston-like cue action first for consistency. Then if you want to add bells and whistles to it later, when you've got your cue control higher, okay, do so. The other mistake, so in that instance, they are dropping the cue, not the elbow. So that would be saying drop the cue, the elbow follows the cue. The other thing players say is, oh, I need to drop the shoulder. It's almost impossible to drop the shoulder. This is dropping the elbow. This is dropping the elbow. It's not dropping the shoulder. Look, the shoulder remains almost stationary. I'd have to do a very good job to drop the elbow itself. So I hope that answers your question, Marko. Remain focused on the cue. The body follows the cue. Then we've got Lam Hui, otherwise known as Geordie from China. He says he's got a problem, especially on angled pots, finding the centre of the cue ball. So this is very common, especially on angled pots, because the player's preoccupied with finding the correct potting angle. So a good exercise, a great exercise that I found here that is just so helpful compared to, we've all heard of the hit the white ball from the brown spot up and down the spots to bring it back in a straight line. The problem with that is that most club tables, frankly, aren't able to send the white up and down the spots if you hit it straight with no side, because the divots in the spots will push the white off, the table's not level, finger marks in the cloth will pull the cue ball off. So an exercise I've found that is even better is if we get a little bit of a wider view where we can see that pocket as well as the cue ball. So I want to see that pocket, and it's called the push practice. So what we practice doing is not potting the white. We're going to practice pushing the white. You'll hear there's no sound here. Get the white touching the white. Get the tip touching the white. Then from a standing start, push. Just gently. So there, I was aiming to the pocket. I'm intending to pot or to push the white into the pocket, but I've gone left of pocket. So what side have I put on that? Right hand side. So let's correct that. Tip touching the white. So I've overcorrected and put left hand side on. What can help is to imagine a vertical black line from the highest part of the white to the lowest part of the white. And you could even use this training ball, the ultimate training ball, to do that, to help you visualize that black line. So this is what I say to a number of players: imagine a solid black line from the highest part to the lowest part of the cue ball, then get down, address on it, and push. That looks easy, but you try and do that 10 times in a row. Or even more so, from the bulk, from the D into one of the top pockets, becomes a very accurate shot. There's a very accurate requirement in centre cue ball sighting to play that. So what I found is that this re-educates the eyes or recalibrates the eyes to see centre cue ball. Very often players will just get out of the habit of seeing centre cue ball. It's not an innate problem with their eyes. I'll just show you what not to do. Listen very carefully and you will hear a hit. This is, I also call this the silent white exercise, because you should hear no contact with the tip on the white. So that doesn't count. This doesn't count. It's very good cue control practice to get the tip touching the white. That's good for your cue control as a player. When it's there, gently push forward. So what we're going to have a look at now is the comments. Let's see what we've got here. Wow, loads of comments. We've got loads going on here. So, the King of Pot, hello, that's not a question. You should get your questions in, the King of Pot. Where are you? I'm here. Okay, Chris from Thailand in Fino snooker clubs. Chris is my good friend. He's got about 7 clubs across Bangkok. Really high-end snooker clubs, so go and pay him a visit if you're ever in Bangkok. So do we increase grip pressure on delivery? Very good question. So what I think here is that players overdo it. As we discussed earlier, the problem with a lot of players is they're over-tightening, which pulls the cue off the line. So I think there is a natural reaction to hold on to the cue a bit tighter as we deliver, especially with speed, otherwise it will just spear out of the hand. So I think holding as loose as possible without letting the cue spear out of the hand will tend to prevent problems. I'm hedging myself here and speaking in a slightly vague way because there's not one rule for everybody. So there are some pros who I know who hold the cue very tight, and they are not the player who I'd say loosen up, because they've spent their entire career holding tight. It works for them. They are in the minority though. So similarly with delivering the cue, there are some players who successfully execute shots physically tightening, consciously tightening the hand. But I see too many players in the clubs overdoing this. So what we're looking for is efficiency. Let's say, let's equate tightening the hand to putting the brakes on the car. If you want to gradually come to a stop on the chest, it's probably not the best example actually. Although if we tighten the hands, it tends to be like slamming on the brakes. So think of it in that way. If we over tighten the hand, it's like slamming on the brakes, and we have less fluency and less cue speed and more body movement as well. So if we were, we've got the featured product here. At the end of the session, I'll just spend 2 or 3 minutes showing you that, the cue action trainer. That shows very clearly that players who tend to tighten, in fact we'll do that now very quickly. So, okay, featured product, cue action trainer. So we've sold out of this year's supply last week. We sold 147 units. And first time I've announced it, we'll be making 50 more for March-April delivery before the World Championship. So let me have your comments on the channel, and I'll reply to you personally if you have an interest in sending you some information on it by email. So we have these balls up on the legs, and what we find is that the idea is to be able to move the cue nice and smoothly. This is much more difficult than it looks. As you can see, a tiny error, the ball comes off. But what we find is that when players over tighten, they all tend to come off. So keep it loose, guys. What else have we got? another favourite of mine. Muni Razak. Muni Razak. I assume that's from Pakistan. I might be wrong, but I have great friends in Pakistan. In fact, we signed our first franchise in Pakistan with Arshad Quresh in Islamabad. So I'm very excited to be working with him. So, let's get it exactly right. Yeah, one of my favourite subjects. The biggest mistake that players make is this. And it causes more frustration than anything, and it causes more people to come through that door into this training room than any other issue. And it ruins happiness, it ruins people's lives almost for years at a time, because they get stuck in this loop where they can't diagnose, they can't progress. The biggest mistake you'll ever make with aiming is to say, what's my dominant eye? And you do this test where you cover the chalk, or you cover the camera with the hole between two eyes, the hole between two hands, pull it toward your face and say, that's my dominant eye. Therefore, let's cue under that eye. This is over-reductionistic, it's inappropriate as a diagnosis for what you need, and it doesn't take into account the other eye. The brain uses two eyes, two cameras to stitch together a 3D image in the brain. What I found is that 90% of players, when they do their dominant eye reading, register the other eye as stronger. So dominance, eye dominance is different from eye strength. So you have the strongest eye, which is how easy would you find it to read that text on the wall. Close one eye, read the text, see what's easier, or do a formal eye vision test. That's different from eye dominance. So the brain takes into account which eye is stronger, which eye is dominant, and then it will find out, usually on its own accord, it will find out the correct chin position to hold the cue. With Ronnie, he's slightly inside. As a right-handed player, he's slightly inside the chin. Stephen Hendry was slightly outside the centre of the chin. Steve Davis was dead centre. They've won 18 world titles between them. Neil Robertson is very much inside. So different strokes for different folks. Horses for courses. That's the finding out your vision centre is not really in the scope of this training. It's a bit of a complicated thing to demonstrate, but you can view that on the aim frame page. There are some videos that explain, and a product that we have that allows you to find your vision centre very easily. So either actually the ultimate training ball or the aim frame will help you answer that and help you discover your own vision centre. Great question, Chris, thank you very much. What else have we got? Okay, Hunza Valley, I don't know where you're from. Maybe make a comment and tell us where you're from, Hunza Valley. How to grip the cue, especially like Ronnie. Now, this is such a great question because we're going to bring this out again. What I've found is that grip hand is one of the most common areas to give faults and misconceptions and problems in your game, because we tend to listen to what someone in the club says, or someone on commentary says, or a professional, or a referee, or an official, or someone in a forum, or someone on YouTube. Don't even listen to me. Listen to what works for your game. Listen to what helps you deliver the cue better. You are the ultimate judge of what works for you and what helps you to deliver the cue better and straighter. If it works, do more of it. If it doesn't, do less of it. So you hear all sorts of weird and wonderful tips for holding the cue. Grip it like a hammer. Grip pointing out like Stephen Hendry. Do like Steve Davis. And I see some players exaggerating that, and they really twist the hand with a lot of force, and it becomes very stiff and robotic and tight, which again pulls the cue off the line. Also I hear, well, hold with the back finger or the front finger or the middle two fingers or this finger or that finger, or when you hit the ball, hit with the first finger. My phone went off. Are we still live? We're still live? Yes. Here we are. Actually, it wasn't a phone call, it was a FaceTime call that cut us off, so didn't realise we could get interrupted by that. So, we're talking about Ronnie's grip. In particular, Ronnie's grip, I hear people all the time trying to get this front finger open, like Ronnie, or like Alex Higgins. People used to do this in the 70s and 80s to push that finger forward. But those two fingers in the middle, let's say Ronnie's always held the cue with the two fingers, and these other two fingers are a bit of a bonus. But that doesn't suit everyone. Most of the pros are holding in the front part of the hand like that, with the thumb and the fingers being a bonus for control and feel. Most professionals could make a ton cueing like that, just because that's where most of the control comes from. Okay? Good question. Let's see what else we've got. Okay, so Ben Kibble, my good friend from Peterborough, I believe. In fact, I'm just going to finish off with the cue action trainer. My train of thought was disrupted there. With the cue action trainer, what we found is that players who come into it, the majority of the time, their hand just relaxes, it loses tension, and it loses their preconceived idea of what form the hand should have, what shape the hand should have. So what you'll find is that players tend to, they'll move the legs offline, or in our situation earlier on, with their current bridge hand set up. They'll tend to, we'll just use those two balls there, look. Their current bridge hand setup, it's too tight, it's too unnatural, and they'll knock the balls off. So the cue action trainer, through immediate, relevant and accurate feedback, will tend to polish off their grip hand, polish it in terms of reducing tension, reducing a preconceived idea of a shape. Now just get into a natural shape of, how do you pick up a broom handle or a hammer like that? You don't think about it, you just hold it naturally. Okay, so Ben Kibble said, what's the, let's get the exact wording right. Right, leading with the head and sliding into the shot. To do this, what I'd like to see is the camera over here, please. So we should be able to demonstrate from here, right? So just pull the camera back a little bit so you get a slightly wider view. Okay, I think that's about right. Okay, just stand slightly to the side. No, leave the camera there. Just if you tip it forward so it can see my head. A little bit more. Is there a delay? Yeah, okay, great. Good. Perfect. So what what many players do is, so they'll step forward. I'm exaggerating like Herman Munster, but it does tend to be a little bit awkward to step, step, bridge hand, cue up. And I'll explain why that there's a danger to that. Because if I were to lift my right foot to approach the shot, I'm going to fall over. Unless I lean to the side, then lift it. Now I'm off the line of aim, aren't I? And then with the left foot, I'll go over here and then hope that I can find the line of aim again. A far more elegant and efficient way to do this is approach the shot not with the feet but with the shoulders. So what I mean by that is tip the shoulders forward 10 millimeters, and the feet will prevent you from slapping your face onto the cushion. So I'll demonstrate that again. Tip the shoulders forward 10 millimeters. The rest will take care of itself. Watch the shoulders. And then you can hear the hands sliding like a swan landing on a lake on the bed of the table. And this is, if you watch the pros, they're all doing this. What this doesn't mean, it doesn't mean tip forward like this and then quickly jump forward. It doesn't mean tip forward and stop yourself from falling forward. It means just keep the body straight and relaxed. All you need to do is tip forward 10 millimeters. Your feet will save you from falling forward, and your bridge hand will follow nice and smooth as well. The reason I don't have a cue ball here is when I'm taking players through this, I get them doing this until they're comfortable. And then when they're in a comfortable position, what I'll do is I'll just put the tip in front of their, a cue ball in front of their tip, line and I'll be standing that side of the table, line an object ball up straight with their cue in the pocket, and then just tell them play and fire. That's how I learned golf. I didn't actually have one lesson, but my trainer said set up first comfortably and then he put the golf ball in front of the club head. When I've done that a few times, then they're ready to approach a live shot, and we'll get them doing that until they feel they're in their correct balance position on every shot they play with that slide forward approach, which just keeps your head on the line of aim, reduces tension and reduces the zigzag effect. Okay, what other questions have we got? Okay, Jagannath Kimball, you asked, and this again is a massive motivation for people coming through this door, reason for people coming through the training room door. I'm consistent, how can I get more consistent? So that is such a big question, and there are a lot of components to that. If we can bring the camera around again to here, because I'm going to draw something on the board. We talked at the beginning about this self-diagnosis loop which up to 40 break players never do properly, which is why they don't improve. You need to watch the ball, diagnose, watch the ball properly and feel the cue properly, diagnose what you did wrong when you missed and make a prescription. That process watch, feel, diagnose, prescribe is what gets people from 40 break to 100 break and beyond. The quality of your ability to do this process, determines your rate of improvement. I can't stress this enough, it's the invisible part of playing snooker. I believe that the two most important seconds in snooker are the 2 seconds after you play the shot. So if I were to do this, I've got no clue how I delivered the cue. I've got no clue what side of the pocket the ball hit. So there's no data. It's as if I played the shot, as soon as the tip hit the white, I closed my eyes, I covered my ears, I have no data. The opposite of that, Sean Murphy's a great example of this. So when he misses, stays down longer. If every club player in the country did only that for the next 2 months, I'd say 10-20% of them would beat their highest break. It's that much of it, makes that much of a difference. So how does this relate to consistency? The better you get at this, the more you apply your basics consistently, the more consistent you will become. What I found is that players of a lower standard tend to be inconsistent. As a player gets better, their average level is higher, perhaps because they are more consistent. They have less variables, so it's easier to identify what they've done wrong, and they get better at diagnosing and prescribing what to do right, because their menu of options, mistake options, is less. So it's easier to identify their errors and improve and reduce and remove them. And then as the player gets even better, or as they get better at diagnosing, their fluctuations reduce and they get even better. So I hope that answers your question. I think we're going to sign off now. We have run over a little bit, but I've really enjoyed it. I'd love to see more comments. I'd love to see ideas for questions, for topics, for themes, frequency of this show, ideas that you might want to see discussed, perhaps shots from professional tournaments that you want discussing or demonstrating or explaining. So I'm open to all ideas, at your service, and signing off for the last time, this is Nick Barrow with the Snooker Gym Life. Did you like my Donald Trump?
Actually, you did it a few times.
I know, I was trying to get you to laugh. Thanks, sweetie.
Oh, sorry for the thing.
No, it's part of the live.
No, earlier, because the screen.
So that the difference in height that I played there was probably only 2 millimeters or so. This is the Snooker Gym Player of the Year for 100 break players. You come to a stop in a controlled way and begin the delivery in a controlled way as well.